Gordon Roger Alexander Buchanan Parks, November 30, 1912 to March 7, 2006, was an American photographer, composer, author, poet, and film director, who became prominent in U.S. documentary photojournalism in the 1940s through 1970s, particularly in issues of civil rights, poverty and African Americans, and in glamour photography. He is best remembered for his iconic photos of poor Americans during the 1940s, taken for a federal government project, for his photographic essays for Life magazine, and as the director of the films Shaft, Shaft's Big Score and the semi-autobiographical The Learning Tree. Parks was one of the first Black American filmmakers to direct films within the Hollywood system, developing films relating the experience of slaves and struggling Black Americans, and helping create the blaxploitation genre. The National Film Registry citation mentions it as the first feature film by a Black director to be financed by a major Hollywood studio. Parks was born in Fort Scott, Kansas, the son of Andrew Jackson Parks and Sarah Ross, on November 30, 1912. He was the youngest of 15 children. His father was a farmer who grew corn, beets, turnips, potatoes, collard greens, and tomatoes. They also had a few ducks, chickens, and hogs. He attended a segregated elementary school. His high school had both Black people and white people, because the town was too small for segregated high schools, but Black students were not allowed to play sports or attend school social activities, and they were discouraged from developing aspirations for higher education. Parks related in a documentary on his life that his teacher told him that his desire to go to college would be a waste of money. When Parks was 11 years old, 3 white boys threw him into the Marmaton River, believing he couldn't swim. He had the presence of mind to duck underwater so they wouldn't see him make it to land. His mother died when he was 14. He spent his last night at the family home sleeping beside his mother's coffin, seeking not only solace, but a way to face his own fear of death. Soon after, he was sent to St. Paul, Minnesota, to live with a sister and her husband. He and his brother-in-law argued frequently and Parks was finally turned out onto the street to fend for himself at the age of 15. Struggling to survive, he worked in brothels, and as a singer, piano player, busboy, traveling waiter, and semi-pro basketball player. In 1929, he briefly worked in an elite gentlemen's club, the Minnesota Club. There he observed the trappings of success and was able to read many books from the club library. When the Wall Street crash of 1929 brought an end to the club, he jumped a train to Chicago, where he managed to land a job in a flophouse. At the age of 28, Parks was struck by photographs of migrant workers in a magazine. He bought his first camera, a Voigtlander Brillant, for $12.50 at a Seattle, Washington, pawn shop and taught himself how to take photos. The photography clerks who developed Parks's first roll of film applauded his work and prompted him to seek a fashion assignment at a women's clothing store in St. Paul, Minnesota, owned by Frank Murphy. Those photographs caught the eye of Marva Lewis, wife of heavyweight boxing champion Joe Louis. She encouraged Parks and his wife, Sally Alvis, to move to Chicago in 1940, where he began a portrait business and specialized in photographs of society women. Parks's photographic work in Chicago, especially in capturing the myriad experiences of African Americans across the city, led him to receive the Julius Rosenwald Fellowship, in 1942, paying him $200 a month and offering him his choice of employer, which, in turn, contributed to being asked to join the Farm Security Administration, FSA, which was chronicling the nation's social conditions, under the auspice of Roy Stryker. Over the next few years, Parks moved from job to job, developing a freelance portrait and fashion photographer sideline. He began to chronicle the city's South Side Black ghetto and, in 1941, an exhibition of those photographs won Parks a photography fellowship with the FSA.